Good morning, everybody. We want to get things started today. My name is Robert Salinas, and I'm president of the Dayton Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, co-sponsors with Dr. Rodriguez with Center for Hispanic Leadership. We're here to get some information and start the next discussion on immigration reform, which is a very important issue in our time. Just wanted to say welcome, everybody, and get the thing started. I'll get Rafi to get up here and get things going. So welcome, and I hope it's a very informative event for everybody.
Thank you, Robert. And let's get going. But before we get started, let me share with you that as the president of the Ohio chapter of the Center for Hispanic Leadership, it is my pleasure to serve as the sponsor and moderator of this panel discussing that we're going to be addressing this morning. CHL, the Center for Hispanic Leadership, and you should have a card on your table that describes a bit about what the CHL is all about. It was founded by Glenn Yopes a few years ago in Los Angeles, California. Glenn is a Cuban American. The CHL's mission is to build authentic Hispanic leaders through culturally relevant training and executive education, and to give Hispanic leaders and consumers a voice. This is very relevant due to the following time-sensitive emerging trends. As we all know, the Hispanic population in the U.S. is over 50 million. Estimated Hispanic purchasing power will be 1.2 trillion as of last year. And Hispanics represent the fastest growing sector of entrepreneurs in the United States, predominantly Hispanic women. With Hispanics in Ohio, we make about 3.1% of the state's population, a 63.4% increase since 2000. That was the census of 2000. And with an estimated 9,700 or so Hispanic-owned businesses with approximately 1.9 billion in receipts. CHL Ohio was launched in the state in November of last year to boost economic education and economic development to ensure Hispanics are part of the economic engine to bring Ohio back on track. We focus on building strategic alliances with corporations, academia, and organizations such as the Dayton Hispanic Chamber to propel their Hispanic talent to new heights. Couple of notice about this event. This is a non-political forum intended to get educated about the 800-page immigration bill currently being debated on the floor of the U.S. Senate, with hundreds of amendments already submitted. The expert panelists are here on their own time to inform us about what are the salient points contained in the bill. If you have a question, please raise your hand, wait for the microphone, state your name, and ask your question succinctly. At this time, we'll introduce you to the panel first, and these are two great friends of the Dayton Hispanic Chamber. Shahrzad Allen, immigration attorney with Prickle, Schaefer, and Evelyn, originally from Tehran, Iran, a naturalized citizen of the U.S. She obtained her JD from the University of Dayton School of Law in 2008. She also has an MBA from Wright State University in 1990, and also a Bachelor's of Science from Wright State in 1997. She has experience in all aspects of our current immigration laws, including family-based, employment-based, and investment-based visas. Shahrzad has represented individuals and companies before the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the National Visa Center, and the various U.S. consulates. She has litigated challenging cases for her clients in the context of asylum and deportation defense before the Immigration Court. She's a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and she's very active in the community, to include the Dayton Hispanic Chamber. David Larson. David is a lifelong resident of the Miami Valley, attending Germantown High School and Wittenberg University before joining the U.S. Peace Corps to serve as an English language teacher in Turkey. Some things we did not know about David. He obtained a master's degree in public administration from the University of North Carolina while working for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in Columbus, Ohio. He's a 1979 graduate of the Ohio State University School of Law and was admitted to the Ohio Bar in the fall of that year. He began his career as a general practitioner, but has done immigration and bankruptcy law almost exclusively for the last 10 years. He spends about half his time in each field. He's currently a shareholder at Baltic Corbin Company, LPA, in Dayton, Ohio. He's a longtime member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. He's married and has 2 adult children. His daughter is currently a law clerk at the Immigration Court in Cleveland, Ohio. He's an active member of the Grace United Methodist Church in Dayton, Ohio. He's also active in the Dayton Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, a board member, and chairs a local Latino and immigrant rights advocates group working for comprehensive immigration reform. So as you can see, we have some highly talented attorneys who know immigration law quite well. Let me share with you the format, and before we continue, if we have one of these, a cell phone, let's go ahead and be ready to be here in no place else. I would respectfully ask you to just turn it to vibrate or off, or maybe feel it vibrate if you want. But please, ensure it doesn't ring. Okay, the format that we're going to have some questions for the panel, and they're going to answer the questions, and later on we're going to have time for Q&A. So if you have a question, write it down, or at least hold it to memory, and we have a session towards the end for Q&A. I'm going to start with David Larson, and the question I have is, again, you'll see some movement here on the podium. David asked me, he's testing my technical skills. David, what is the proposed path to legal status for the approximately 11 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S.?
It has a lot of requirements that the individuals have to meet before they can get what's called registered provisional immigrant status. And the initial phase would be the application phase, which is expected to take a while, maybe as long as 2 years. They can get then the registered provisional immigrant status for 6 years, and that can be extended for another 6, but it's also possible then at the end of the first RPI period, registered provisional immigrant status, at the end of that first period, they could apply to become citizens. And so it's expected that it's about a 13-year path to citizenship. I think one of the reasons that it's expected to take so long is political, that you, of course, are not going to be a voter until you're a citizen. So it's important to have people cemented into the culture before they become voters. And I think that tends to favor the Republican Party at this point in time, because the large bulk of the undocumented immigrants in the U.S. are Latino, and in the last election, the Democrats overwhelmingly took the Latino vote. So I think the Republicans are particularly interested in seeing that these are solid U.S. citizens before they start voting, and give the Republicans a chance over the next 13 years to convert some of them from the dark side, from the Republican point of view.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Ralph, you got this slide up. One of the reasons I asked, I have a couple of graphics, and it's important for us to understand at least a couple of things. One is that the Senate bill is probably not what's going to become law. We hope that many of the provisions that are in the Senate bill will become law, but the House of Representatives has not really taken up the issue in any comprehensive way yet, and it's not even guaranteed that we'll end up getting a bill at all. There just may not be enough support in the House to produce a comprehensive immigration reform bill. The reason I brought up this graphic is I wanted you to see what things are like now, because that's the impetus for immigration reform, is what's our current system and why do we need to change it. One of the reasons is that we have huge backlogs of people waiting in the family immigration categories for their quota number to come up. And this graphic helps you to see that.
Chair Zahn, does the proposed bill have a provision that opens up a pathway to legalization for those foreign nationals who have provided services in the agricultural industry?
Yes, it absolutely does. And as David talked about, the provisional status, that has a cutoff date. Individuals can only qualify, potentially qualify for that benefit if they can prove that they've entered the country before end of 2011. Because it has that cutoff date, there might be individuals that entered the country after that date, but they were working in the agricultural industry. So there is a provision in the pending bill that will still open up a pathway to lawful permanent residency for those individuals. The criteria for that is that they have to show that they have performed at least 575 hours or 100 work days of agricultural employment within a 2-year period, which ends on December 31st, 2012. So as long as they can prove that, now they still have to qualify in other ways as far as there'll be a background check, they have to go for biometrics, they can't have criminal convictions, but they could potentially get this status. This status would allow them to stay in the United States for a total period of 8 years, but they would be eligible to apply for lawful permanent residency after they've had the status for 5 years, and eventually 5 years after that become a U.S. citizen. So this provision targets those who have committed themselves to the agricultural industry. We have a need for that, and it's important to have this provision because otherwise so many people might have been excluded. Again, keep in mind these individuals will have to pay a penalty because they did enter the country without documentation. They have to show that they have paid their taxes, and they have to show that they have been employed, and they will not qualify for any kind of government aid or benefit. So we're looking, this will give a benefit to those that are working hard in an area where we have a need.
Thank you. Next question is for David. What are the provisions for people brought to the U.S. when they were under 16? And there's a slide you want me to go to.
Yes, page 8, the employment slide. The employment slide that's going to be coming up shows the backlogs and the timing involved in employment-based immigration. Again, I'm trying to show you what our current system is like, so it'll help you to understand what's being proposed in the new legislation. Now, with regard to what we've come to call Dreamers, the DREAM Act is a part of this bill. And so children that have been brought here before age 16 are given additional relief. And they are able to get lawful permanent resident status a lot faster than the normal registered traditional immigrant because they've grown up here and they've become, they're new Americans, basically. and don't really have a home in the countries where they were born. So that's, that essentially that's the provision for Dreamers.
Next question is for Sharzan. How does the bill propose to change the future of immigration?
Traditionally, our immigration system has been based on family immigration, which basically means if there's a lawful permanent resident or a U.S. citizen, they can petition for their family members, whether they're within the United States or outside of the United States, to be able to get a lawful status. This bill proposes to kind of switch the system from just family-based to more of a merit-based immigration system. The reason that I feel that's a very positive move is because under the merit system, it will still take into consideration the family relationships, but the system will be designed where individuals will receive points based on factors such as education, their occupation, their involvement in the country. As David mentioned, there are individuals that they might be in the United States, they're here legally, but they're here on a non-immigrant status and they're waiting for an employment-based visa to open up. They could be here for 5, 6, 7, up to 10 years before they become lawful permanent residents. Under the merit base, they would get points if they've been working in the United States for a number of years, if it's a certain occupation that there's a shortage in the United States. All those points would add up, and hopefully you'll get that individual to a lawful permanent residency status quicker. The downside of this is the fact that there are certain family-based categories that we have currently in our system that could potentially be eliminated. And one of those categories is the siblings of U.S. citizens. My personal opinion on that is, right now, if an individual files a petition for their sibling, and first of all, you have to be a U.S. citizen before you could do that. And when you file a petition, it could take anywhere from 10 to 12, 13 years before your sibling could even enter the country. Under the merit-based system, that same individual, based on their education, the occupation, and the family relationship, could actually accumulate points to a level where they could enter the country much quicker. So even though it might be a negative thing that some of the categories might be eliminated, I think the new system, the proposed system, would be much better for the United States, for American workers, because we could actually attract innovators. We could attract the highly educated individuals. Our system right now allows students to come into this country and get the best education our universities provide. Right here locally in the Dayton area, have a lot of foreign students attending Wright State University and University of Dayton. They get great education. Above and beyond that, our current immigration system allows them to stay here and get practical training anywhere from 12 months up to 29 months, depending on the area of their education. But at the end of that, when we have all these intelligent, bright, young individuals, highly educated, they've gotten the training, the system doesn't necessarily allow them to stay in the United States. It would be so difficult. So once we've given them everything they need, then they'll go off to another country, and we put them in a position to actually compete with us globally. Under the merit-based system, it will put us in such a better position because we can retain those individuals, and they can help build our economy and help us to continue to stay the #1 nation in the world as we have been in the past.
Thank you. As you can see, I hope you generated questions in your mind, because I have 3 or 4 already, and I have to go my turn as well. So that was pretty enlightening. David, what are the provisions for professional workers and international corporation personnel? If I need to go to a slide, let me know which page.
No, there's no slide for this one.
no slide for this one. The provisions for people who have at least a baccalaureate degree or people who are employees of international corporations really don't change that much. It's still available. The big change is really in allowing unskilled workers to come into the country. There's a new letter designation for the people with baccalaureate degrees. The letter designation is H-1B. And H-1B, the big change in that area is that the quota on the number of H-1Bs that can be given out each year is going to be increased from 65,000 a year to between 110,000 and 180,000, which is a significant provision of the bill because it addresses the issue that Shahrzad raised so eloquently about losing the brains that we've trained. Instead of having brains trained here in the United States, stay in the United States, we're having brains drained out of the United States because we run out of the quota numbers for H-1Bs in the first week of applications. Yeah, let me back up on that because how many of you are familiar with H-1B? Let's see, raise of hands. And how many never heard of it before? Okay, so we've got a mixture. But the real engine, economic engine that the H-1B provides is, of course, highly educated individuals into the workforce, particularly in the STEM area, science, technology, engineering, and math. So the IT companies in particular have been very vocal on Capitol Hill saying we need more of these H-1B slots available each year because they help drive our economy, they help drive our companies, they help increase our economic impact. So this is a very big provision in the proposed legislation, increasing, almost doubling, probably will double the number of slots available each year, so that unlike in the last year and the current year, the number of slots were, I think, around 85,000, including people with master's degrees, and they were used up. Applications were received for those 85,000 within the first week, plus another 85,000. So there were like 170,000 applications received in the first week for about 85,000 slots. And that has not always been true. When the economy was in a downturn, we ran out of slots in maybe November or December. But when the economy since the economy has turned around, and when the economy was going gangbusters before our Great Recession, these 65,000, 85,000 were being used up in the very first week. And that meant that anyone graduating from college that did not already have an employer in April had to wait until October of the following year before that person could start work. So this is really, really good for our country. The other provisions that are contained in there for H-1Bs and L-1s are the people who are international corporation employees. And it doesn't mean anybody. You have to be either a manager or an executive or you have to have specialized knowledge. You have to be, it doesn't have to be proprietary knowledge, but it has to be knowledge that the employer can't really replicate readily in the United States. So the big change for L1s is that there will have to be additional verifications made to prevent fraud from being, prevent people from using the L designation as a loophole to get somebody into the country who's not really a manager or an executive or does not have specialized knowledge, but just wants to be here in the United States for reasons that most people want to be here. So I'm sorry to be so long-winded, but the important thing is we're doubling the number of H-1Bs. That means a lot more highly educated, skilled people into the workforce, which has got to be good for our economy. And we're putting in some anti-fraud provisions to prevent fraud in the H category and the L category.
Thank you, David. As you can see, the level of complexity about this legislation is amazing. I mean, just hearing them talk is like, wow, I need to start reading that bill, 800 pages for it. Okay, Sheriff, what effect, if any, would passage of this bill have on business employers?
Well, there's a lot contained in the proposed bill that can have potential effect on employers and businesses, but just wanted to talk about a few that I think are interesting, and I think they could have a huge impact on employers. Well, one of them is the bill proposes a new non-immigrant visa category. It will be called W non-immigrant. And this is for lower skilled workers, but non-agricultural. So if there are employers in a certain industry that have the need, and there's a shortage within U.S. workers, and the employer needs to bring in foreign nationals, and it's not a seasonal position, which just happens to be a shortage in that industry, the employers can petition and bring in foreign nationals on a non-immigrant basis for a period of 3 years. That is something we haven't had. At this point, we've got a certain of non-immigrant visa under our current immigration laws that are for agricultural workers, and we have a few numbers available for non-agricultural workers, but those have to only be a shortage for a limited duration. I think it's important to understand the problem we're faced with today with having all of the undocumented aliens within our country. The underlying reason is there were jobs here in the United States that there weren't being filled by U.S. workers. And there were individuals south of our border that needed those jobs. They couldn't come into the country legally. The employers couldn't petition to bring them into the country legally. Therefore, they crossed the border and they were able to survive financially by taking those jobs, and they have stayed here, and now they have families. That's part of the reason we're faced with the problem we are today. A provision such as this, opening up this W non-immigrant visa, will give the right tools to employers to bring in foreign nationals when there is a need. It is non-immigrant. It does not turn into lawful permanent residency, but it will fill the need that an employer has. And it will also give opportunity for foreign nationals who want to come into this country and work. It gives them that opportunity. They would have to go back after 3 years and stay out of the country for a certain period of time, and then they can apply again. So that's one provision that I think is very positive. The other aspect of how this proposed bill will affect employers is that once our system is fixed, once employers have the ability to hire foreign nationals, bring them into the country or hire the ones that are already here, there is really no reason why employers should employ anyone who's unauthorized. Because the government has now given them the tools to hire authorized workers. Therefore, part of what's being proposed is that employers who choose to circumvent the immigration laws, employers who continue or choose to start hiring unauthorized workers will be penalized. They have to put an enforcement system in place. How many in this room are already familiar with E-Verify system, or at least have heard of it? Right now, E-Verify is mandatory for a very small portion of employers and businesses in the United States. This bill proposes to make E-Verify mandatory within 5 years of its enactment. Now, it's not going to happen all at once, but it will eventually be where this internet-based system will be used by every single employer in the United States, regardless of size. E-Verify is used to make sure that the worker is authorized to work in the United States. Because of what this bill will do for our system, for our immigration system, and how it will allow a lot of people that up to this point haven't had legal status, it will give them legal status and they will be authorized to work, that will take away all of this extra time that immigration and custom enforcement agents are spending going after unauthorized individuals in the United States. They no longer have to spend as much time, so they will have more time going after employers who are not complying with the laws. The bill proposes, so there will be audits done for businesses and employers. So it's extremely important that if this bill passes, and once an employer is required to use the E-Verify system, it's extremely important, it's imperative for them to have the right tools and the right training, because the penalties are severe. What's being proposed is that the penalties could be anywhere from $3,500 all the way up to $25,000 per unauthorized worker, depending on whether this employer has been in this situation before or not. So if this is the first time, and this is the first unauthorized worker that the employer has had, it could be as little as $3,500, which is still a lot of money. That money should actually be invested by the employer to get proper training, regardless of whether you have a one-person HR department or a huge department that handles it. Proper training and having a proper system in place is extremely important. And as long as the employer has done all of that, and they can show good faith effort that they did everything they were supposed to do, if they do end up hiring someone who wasn't authorized to work, the system would be very lenient on that business. But other than that, there will be huge penalties. So that's one area that, of course, it's going to be down the road. It's not going to be for every single employer right away, but eventually it will be a requirement. And that's what I want businesses and employers to be mindful of, is the E-Verify system and verification of authorized workers in the United States.
Thank you, Shamsa. A question for David, and this is a topic that we hear a lot about. David, what provisions do we see in the bill to make the borders more secure? And remember, the borders are not just land. We have sea border, the sea border, we have the air border, and we also have the southern border, as well as the northern tier. But we have significant amount of Canadians that are here in the United States. So, what provisions do we see in the bill that makes our borders more secure?
Right, Rafi, I would like to look at a graphic on this one, page 14. But before I start really talking about border enforcement, I just want to summarize what I think are the most important aspects of this proposed reform legislation, particularly for employers. The good news is more legal workers are going to be available. So everybody from McDonald's to Microsoft all those employers are going to have a larger pool of labor available to do the work that needs to be done. The bad news, as Shahrzad just pointed out, is that there's going to be a lot more scrutiny of employers as to their hiring practices, as to whether they are hiring people who are authorized to work or not. And that's going to be true for, regardless of the size of the employer. I think there are some benefits for really small employers, but if you're, your workforce is maybe 25 to 50 people, you've still got to comply with all of the record keeping. You've got to look at the documents of your new hires, make sure that the documents show that the people are authorized to work, and you have to keep files on the people that you hire for certain periods of time, and all of that has to be available if the Department of Labor wants to check on it at any time. So good news, more workers; bad news, more paperwork. Now, this graphic, in just over 2 years, between July 1, 2010 and September 2012, the Department of Homeland Security deported 204,810 parents of U.S. citizens, amounting to nearly 23% of all deportations. So it's not as if enforcement has not been going on. Enforcement has never been higher priority or more effective than it is today. One of the questions I suggested that Rafi asked is how many agents patrol the U.S. border with Mexico? Anybody have any idea? Does anybody have a guess? 1,000?
Go ahead,
100,000? Okay, what's in between? In 2012, there were 18,500 Border Patrol agents patrolling the Mexican border. That's up from 9,900 in 2005 and 3,500 in 1992. So we've pretty much doubled the number of agents patrolling the Mexican border in the last 7 years. How about apprehensions? Guess how many apprehensions have been made? Last year, how many people were apprehended at the southern border? Just shout it out.
Go ahead, 100,000. Go ahead, 100,000. Go ahead, 200,000. 300,000.
How many? There were 327,577 apprehensions in 2011. Sorry, not last year, 2011. That's as opposed to 1.64 million in 2000. So we have double the number of agents apprehending less than a fourth. So the apprehensions for agents are way down. So we have not been neglecting enforcement, even though it may sound like that in the newspapers and on TV. And we've been deporting people at higher rates and greater numbers than we ever have before, and we've been beefing up our detention and apprehension resources as well. Now, what the proposed bill does, because border security is such a high priority for some of the senators, and It is political. The Republican Party is a lot more concerned about border security than the Democratic Party. And so, in order to get the votes, in order to pass this in the Senate, there has to be tough provisions for border enforcement. So they're proposing additional fencing, additional electronic surveillance, increasing the number of agents. On the other side, there are some good provisions in there with regard to enforcement, in that there will also be an increase in the number of judges and support staff for the judges, so that you don't have dockets that are backed up 3 or 4 years for a merits hearing on a deportation case. So I've talked long enough about that.
Another question for Sherzad. Does the proposed bill have any provisions that would allow the U.S. to become more welcoming to investors and entrepreneurs?
Absolutely, and it's about time. It's about time for us to actually attract foreign money into this country so they can make an investment here, so they can create more jobs for Americans. The bill does propose a new non-immigrant investor visa. It does allow for individuals who want to bring in about $100,000 into the United States, invest it, create a minimum of 3 jobs. And as long as they can show that the business is viable, that the business is generating revenue, they could continue to keep a non-immigrant status. Let me make sure everyone understands, within our current system and after, if this bill passes with our new system, we'll always have non-immigrant categories versus immigrant categories. Non-immigrant categories are usually limited duration. These are individuals that just want to come to the United States on a temporary basis. Now that temporary basis could be anywhere from a year to 6, 7, 8 years, but it will never end up in the lawful permanent residency. They will never end up with a green card. It's a different intent that the foreign national has. They only want to stay in the United States on a temporary basis. Immigrant visas are those types of visas that individuals come in because they want to reside in the United States permanently. Those are lawful permanent residency statuses. So this bill opens up a non-immigrant investment-based visa. This is for an individual or a company. It might be a foreign national company that just wants to open up a subsidiary here and wants to maybe bring some of the partners of the business into the United States. So as long as they meet the qualifications, they would get non-immigrant status. It's not just the money that's brought in and invested over here, and it's not just the jobs that are created. It brings people, it also brings foreign nationals into this country who are going to live here. When you're living in this area, if you're living in the Dayton area, then you probably either rent a place or you invest money in the property. When you're living in the Dayton area, you're going out to restaurants, you're buying food. It just has a positive effect in our economy at the local level and state level and within our country. That's what this bill proposes to do. This bill has gotten so much attention on what it could do for 11 million undocumented, but no one talks about all the other provisions of how great this could be for our country. The non-immigrant investor visa, which will be called an X visa, that's just one of the types. It also opens up immigrant investment type visas. Right now we have the EB-5 program. The EB-5 program allows an individual who wants to bring in $1 million into this country to invest. They could get lawful permanent residency on a conditional basis. So even if a person does have $1 million, which not a lot of people do, but let's say they do, and they bring it into the country and they invest it in the company, because they have conditional residency, after 2 years they actually have to file a petition to get the condition removed. If the business has fallen apart, if it's a startup that doesn't make it, that individual will lose his or her lawful permanent residency. It just seems unfair that for a person that has decided to bring in $1 million into our economy, invest it, but somehow fails, they'll end up losing their residency. That's what the system is right now. And the visa numbers that are available But this bill proposes to have a new category of immigrant investment visa, and it would allow those individuals to be able to get lawful permanent residency, and it concentrates more, not just on the amount of investment, but whether, how much revenue the company is generating and how many jobs it is creating for U.S. workers. So it'll be more attractive. There are times in my practice that is so frustrating within our current system because there are foreign companies who would like to start up companies here in the United States, but the laws are so complex and they're so strict that at times my hands are tied, I can't help them. But the country to our north, Canada, is a lot more welcoming, a lot more welcoming. So companies will end up starting up over there in Canada instead of the United States. We lose out on those opportunities every year. If this bill passes as it stands, and I do agree with David that as it is written right now, it probably won't pass, there will be some changes. But if we could pass it with some of the major provisions intact, it would help our economy so much. And this is part of it, being able to attract investors, innovators, entrepreneurs. These are individuals who want to come into this country because they see an opportunity to make a better life for themselves. And as they do that, they actually make a better life for Americans. They create jobs, and they help our economy, and they help us to move ahead. And that's what we need, and that's what this bill proposes to do.
Folks, I have one last question for the panel, and then we'll open it up to the floor. And this question is to pretty much to wrap it up. It's a question, the same question of both David and Sharzan. In the provisions in this bill, as you addressed, are pretty complicated. But how do we see this bill making an impact to our economy? And let's start with David.
It should be great for the economy, and I'm going to keep it very short. There was just a Congressional Budget Office report released yesterday that projects $179 billion benefit to the U.S. government budget over the next 10 years. $179 billion to the good in our federal budget as a result of this immigration bill over the next 10 years. Over the 10 years following that, a $700 billion benefit. Was I saying millions?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. 179 billion over the next 10 years, 700 billion over the following 10 years.
Very good.
There have been studies that show that this bill will cost our country so much that it will add to the deficit. Those studies have, in my opinion, there's a major flaw in those studies. Those studies are looking at the fact that the majority of the undocumented aliens in our country right now are taking the lower skilled jobs. They are getting lower wages. But once we allow them to come out of the shadows, once we give them legal status, doesn't necessarily mean that they will continue down the same path and have those lower skilled jobs or low wages. Not only that, the children of the undocumented aliens, the studies that are basically show that this will actually cost our country more money, are assuming that the children of the undocumented will never pursue an education. They will never try to better themselves. And that could not be further from the truth. I represent young, undocumented aliens. These are young adults who were brought into this country at no fault of their own. They were brought in at the age of 4, 5, 6 years old. They're in their early 20s. And you know what they're doing right now? They are working in the back kitchen in a restaurant someplace. Yes, they are working for roofing companies, but they have dreams of becoming engineers, nurses, teachers, but our society doesn't allow them right now because they don't have legal status. If this bill were to pass, these individuals can pursue their education. They no longer have to take those lower skilled positions. They don't have to gain jobs or obtain jobs that pay lower wages. They can pursue their education and they can make a better life for themselves over here than what their parents had. As we allow these individuals to come out of the shadows and pursue their education or get better employment, wages will go up. They will continue to stay in the United States. They will have, if they're making more money, they have greater buying power. They're going to be spending more money. Some of them want to start businesses. I just met with an individual last week who's been here for 10 years, has worked very hard, and the amount of money he spends to survive financially in the United States, he keeps here. Everything else he's sending back home, and he's buying property in his home country. I asked him why he has no money here in the United States. He said, I couldn't open up a bank account. I couldn't buy property. I would love to bring all that money into the United States, but I don't have legal status right now. So that's what our current system is doing. So the positive impact of it is, yes, we will allow 11 million undocumented to eventually down the road have lawful permanent residency. But meanwhile, as soon as we allow them to come out of shadows, they're going to be working and they're going to be paying taxes. They're going to be paying federal taxes, state taxes, local taxes. So right there, we'll see an increase in the tax revenue. They're going to start paying into Social Security and Medicare, which they haven't up to this point, not because they don't want to, but because they don't have Social Security numbers, because we don't allow them to have Social Security numbers. So that's another positive impact. As David mentioned, 175 billion reduction in our deficit in the next 10 years. This is coming from the Congressional Budget Office. They gave a score to the bill, to the proposed bill. That's this office stating that. No matter how you look at it, on the non-immigrant, on the immigrant side, on helping the undocumented to gain lawful permanent residency, this bill will have such a positive impact on our economy, no matter how you look at it. So the studies out there that make this seem like it's going to cost United States, it's going to cost our government more money, it's wrong. Yes, it does have a cost associated with it. It is estimated that this legalization will have a cost of $22 billion. But the positive impact of it is about $197 billion, and that's how you come up with the 175 reduction in the deficit. So yes, it does have a cost. Absolutely. There is a cost to make our borders more secure. But let's look at the net effect. This bill doesn't just take care of our current problems, it will set us up for years to come so we would have a better immigration system. This is something that has never happened before. It seems like each time they enacted the bill, it just targeted and took care of the problem at hand. This bill is looking into the future, and it does have provisions in there that will fluctuate based on our economy. If we have high unemployment rate, there will be less number of visas available. So it will absolutely have a positive impact on our economy. And I wanted to mention one more thing. As David had stated earlier, for a number of years, enforcement, deportation, removal has been the tool that has been used. Okay? Let's go after these people who are here without authorization. out of the country. Immigration Customs Enforcement estimates that cost of one single deportation is over $8,000. We're spending over $8,000 each time we deport one individual, and that one individual most often is a mother or a father. A lot of times that individual is the breadwinner for the family. So once we spend $8,000 and get them out of the country, they leave behind the spouse and children. Most often those children are U.S. citizens, sometimes the spouses are U.S. citizens also. And guess who ends up taking care of that family once we get rid of the breadwinner? It's all of us. It's all of us. So, positive impact on our economy, positive impact on our society. We need to know who they are, where they live, and what they're doing. We need to know if they've got criminal convictions. And unless a bill such as this would pass, which would allow individuals to come out of the shadows and actually let the government know who they are and what they're doing, we will never be able to take care of this problem. Enforcement has been in place for years. It hasn't gotten us to where we need to be. We constantly are faced with this problem. The time is now to take care of this.
Thank you, Chef Sal. We have a few minutes for questions from the audience. Please remember, if you have a question, raise your hand. Yvette, can you please come to the microphone? State your name, ask your questions succinctly, and we'll just address which one of the two attorneys you want to address the question. We have a question, lady in the back.
While we're getting there, I just want to give you a website, www.immigrationpolicy.org. You can find a lot of good information on a variety of topics, particularly there's one published, report published May 2013 called Adding It Up, Accurately Gauging the Economic Impact of Immigration Reform. The Immigration Policy Center is part of the American Immigration Council, which is a nonprofit that was set up by the American Immigration Lawyers Association. So it is an organization that is pro-immigration, so I don't want you to think that they're totally unbiased, but they do the very best job they can to support the reports and the papers that they write with scientific literature and unbiased reports such as the Congressional Budget Office report. Okay, sorry for that. Okay.
Question?
Yes, good morning. My name is Esther Keys, and I am here representing the Home Depot Corporation. I sit on the Diversity Council there. First of all, I'd like to thank you both, not only for your time, but of your knowledge, but mostly your passion. It has shown very clearly that you really believe in this presentation, and I really appreciate it. My question is, Mr. Larson, when you spoke of the Dreamers and the aspect of the proposed bill regarding the new allowable status of the non-immigrant children, that they would have to come into this country before they reach the age of 16. There's a couple of things that I was aware of. Those children, the condition of their remaining here in this country would be that, first of all, they would have had to finish high school here. Second of all, that they would not have any kind of criminal background while they were here. And then also my understanding is that they would have to be part of some kind of a nucleus family. In other words, they would have to be here with a parent, not an extended family member. That's the first part of my question. The second part of my question deals with the education, not only of those children once they remain here, and I'm talking about their continued education. In other words, once they graduate from high school, is that where we're going to stop their education, or they be allowed to continue applying for some kind of scholarship, so on and so forth? The second part of that question is dealing with the children that are here now that are American citizens. Yes, they graduate from high school, but when those same children go to apply for any kind of scholarship, it's not made available to them because, first of all, you have to include your parents' income on most of the forms that you would have to fill out for scholarship. They can't do that. Their parents are mostly here illegally. So those children that we have here that are American citizens now, with the system that we have in place, they can't better themselves. So is there something in the proposed new immigration reform that will address that?
Actually, I've lost track of it.
I'm so sorry. You know what? Basically, it's education. I'm all about education and actually going beyond high school.
Well, the bill, I'm not aware that the bill contains a lot of provision with regard to access to loans and grants, particularly federal loans and grants. But I think it does, I remember some parts of your question, and I think it will address the issue of the parents' incomes, because the parents will be able to demonstrate income a lot more clearly if they're legally employed on payroll, paying income tax withholding, Medicare, Social Security, and that kind of thing. So I think that will probably take care of itself if the provisions for legalization go through. And that's not really part of the DREAM Act, but it's a tangential part. And the other aspect, the other comment I have on your question is that a lot of the financing issues for education are up to the states. So it's going to vary from state to state. And it would certainly be good if there were provisions in the bill that said, yes, Dreamers are eligible for scholarships and grants, but I apologize, I'm not sure whether that's in there or not.
Ohio doesn't have that. I know that Arizona at the moment and California do have that.
Excuse me, Esther, for the matter of time, I'll give all the people an opportunity for another question. Please feel free to contact David afterwards to follow on. Do we have another question, please?
Yes, thanks, Rocky. I guess it would go to either of you. Mine is kind of education-based also. And with David, when you mentioned...
Say your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rocky. I'm Paul Brown. I work with the Department of Labor affiliate. I'm with the job training program for employment training. So my question is dealing with kind of the education aspect, but I'll try to be a little bit more specific on that. Because as a prelude to that, years ago, Department of Labor was asked, or 20 years ago or so, we were supposed to not duplicate services. So that's when we started partnering up with the Department of Education. So as a prelude to that, my question is, do you know if there's anything in there like things like a ESL requirement, or can the parents have the option of homeschooling? Because that to me, I think would be a concern for these 16-year-olds that are coming in the country that may not have an education base. So I'm kind of looking at those education components that may be part of the deal. And you mentioned it, but I think Sherry's out. I think you were starting to get into what some of those components may be. Thank you.
Part of this bill, when it is targeting the younger generation that were brought into this country, part of the requirement is for them to actually have graduated from high school or have gotten their GED. And they have to show that they have either attended college, they have gotten like a 2-year associate degree, or they have served time in the military. So yes, it is targeted for those that want to pursue their education. I think, if I understand you correctly, you're asking if it has if any of the qualifications is based on education, and yes it is, the DREAM Act is for those individuals who do want to get an education. And homeschooling, if that is an option, and I can tell you, about a year ago, the Obama administration offered deferred action for childhood arrivals. This was not a DREAM Act, it was just a policy change to allow that young undocumented to be able to get legal presence here and be able to get work authorization. Under that, one of the qualifications was that they would be attending school. Homeschooling is fine as long as it's being provided through a certain system. Knowing the English language, being proficient in the English language is going to be a requirement under any of these provisions. But certainly the DREAM Act is targeted for those individuals who want to pursue their education. And that's what they have to show, that they either are signed up for classes and they plan on taking their GED, or they have graduated from high school and they are pursuing higher education. I hope I answered your question.
The reason, and this real quick, Chair, is that most people that are Latino, Hispanic, or they're in a Spanish country, a college degree is actually a high school diploma. So I'm wondering if that's taken into consideration. Like I have family from Panama that come here and they had a college degree, but it's on just really a high school diploma. Is that in consideration anywhere?
Well,
or what a college degree may be in one country versus what our requirements are?
Absolutely. When we look at education, if there's any provision that requires a college degree, if it's a degree that was earned in a foreign country, we would have to do, there are companies that do education equivalency to see if that's equivalent to a U.S. degree. So you might have, an individual might have gotten a bachelor's degree in another country. We would look at it to see if that's equivalent to a bachelor's degree in the United States.
Folks, unfortunately, we're running out of time for the official portion of the program. If you have any questions, feel free to address them to Shahzad and David after the program if you want to. With one official question. I'm going to call Iman to come up, and one question, was there something of interest to you, this panel that we did this morning? Okay, raise your hand if it was of interest to you. Now, would you be interested in having a follow-on panel once we have legislation in place that is enacted into law? Okay, thank you. Iman?
We have one more question.
Good morning. I want to thank you for all of you for attending. I hope this was very useful to you. On your table, you have some evaluation forms. These are very important to us. We want to continue to have the information we need in order to create more of these forms for you. So please, everyone at the table, take one of those forms and complete it. The other is that we do have a table on the way out. It's on the right. It has a small gift for you that you can take. You have information for the Dayton Hispanic Chamber as well, should any of you not be familiar with our organization. Also, that literature is on the way out. I'd like to now present a couple of thank yous for our panel. Actually, this is going to be for the Dayton Hispanic Chamber, and this is for our president. If you can come up here and accept it. This is for sponsoring this and supporting this Immigration Reform Leadership Forum together with our partners. I'd like to give this to Shirazad Allen from Pickerel, Chamber, and England. In appreciation for your support. Mr. David Larson, Altlick, and Corwin. Thank you, David. And last but not least, we have Rafi Rodriguez, the Center of Hispanic Leadership, and Rodriguez Financial Strategies, who also supported us as one of our co-sponsors. Thank you very much. I think we had a few more questions, so if we were not able to get to you, feel free to maybe stop and we can briefly answer those questions for you. But for now, thank you. As you can see, here's a thank you slide, so you can read all the people that were involved in getting this done for you.